Thank you, Nikki. And so, as you mentioned, welcome back. Hopefully, everybody had a chance to refresh their coffee. Our session, the final session of the day, will be focused on elevating Sage Intacct reporting. We'll do a quick introduction here of myself and Brian, and then we'll jump right into the objectives. So for myself, Matt Grimm, I'm a senior software consultant with Dean Dorton. I have over 10 years of software consulting experience. About 3 of those years focused specifically on Intacct. So that's a quick intro of myself. I know Brian had already, if you saw his session, you might already know, but I'll let him do a quick intro as well.
Thanks, Matt. Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Brian DeRosa, and I've got 5 years of Sage Intacct experience.
Okay, so for the objectives of this session, we want to focus on, essentially, I'll walk through a few of the reasons why elevating your reporting in Intacct matters. I'll give a kind of a quick overview of the different reporting solutions within Intacct. And then Brian will give live demonstrations of how to utilize dashboards, financial reports, and custom reports, hopefully giving you some information that will help you elevate your own reporting within your organizations. Just a reminder for the poll, we'll have 3 poll questions on this session. There's 2 ways to participate. Hopefully everybody has been able to and ran into no issues with that. Okay, to keep moving, we have a lot to cover. I know Brian has a ton to go through. I'm sure everybody wants to see the demonstrations. I personally am more visual, so I'll quickly talk through why elevating reporting matters here. So the first point here is real time. Getting real-time insights for managing workflows. Tabitha just had a great session that outlined, checklist and being able to manage whether it's operational, shipping, receiving, project tasks, or related to the financial space, reconciliations, month-end close, building out those checklists, being able to track that progress, getting that real-time insight to see where things are within your business. The second point here is streamlining financial insights, and I want to put emphasis on the accuracy. I see so many times where certain ERP systems, you have to combine, your departments, your locations, classes, into your chart of accounts. And then I see a lot of companies that will dump that information out, and they'll try to slice and dice the data, create these massive spreadsheets with multiple formulas. And all of that does is just introduces risk of error or having bad information. One minor mistake in a formula could throw, any kind of analysis you're doing completely off. So utilizing Sage Intacct's multi-dimensional data is just a simple, easy way to not have to dump all of that out. You don't have to include your location, department classes in your chart of account. It's all there. The data's there. You just need to tag the dimensions, and you'll be able to report on those. The other and final point that I'm going to mention here is the performance insights in strategic decision making. I know Tabitha mentioned a couple. I have a couple listed here. Being able to identify areas, for example, delayed invoice processing, or even to track your cash flow trends and see if there's potential for revenue growth opportunities. I know personally I had a real life example where a company was trying to analyze their expenses. They had a fleet of vehicles for deliveries, and we spent weeks collecting the data, trying to parse it out. Instead, with Intacct, we could have simply tagged certain dimensions and created that report instead of in weeks, probably hours or less. So from here, I'm going to jump into and kind of give an overview of the reporting solutions within Sage Intacct. Starting with what I like to consider the core solutions, your standard reports. These are reports that are pre-built, can't edit them, right? And they're pretty limited to what they already have as far as options for filtering, layout, being able to group things like that. Can't really do much with them, right? They're standard reports that are just pre-built, usually within each module or application. The next area is the financial report writer. This is where you can customize financial reports specific to your financial balances, right? They're based on the account groups and can be expanded by time period, dimension, and you can also customize these reports to include different filter options, prompts, so you have a little more control and ability to customize those. The last one of the core solutions that we're going to talk about today will be on the custom report writer. And this is where you can actually create custom reports for each application. It's not driven specific off of the financial GL data. So it's predefined data sets, which will include related objects, right? So if you have certain objects, I'm going to use an invoice, for example, you might have an object of an AR header where you have your header information, and then you have child related objects such as your line items for that invoice. The more advanced solutions that Sage Intacct offers, which do require an additional subscription, but I do want to mention them. The interactive custom report writer. Again, this is a more advanced report writer that allows users to create reports with access to interactive, kind of real-time data. It offers more advanced features for customizing the appearance, prompts, filters, and even more advanced features such as utilizing SQL statements to extract the data and create your data sources. The final one I want to mention here is the interactive visual explorer, similar to the custom report writer, interactive custom report writer. It allows users to create, and present application data in different formats, such as graphs, charts, pivot tables. So it's more of a visual report creation. So again, the high level on those solutions, a few things that we want to mention here, and I want to go through. Oh, so sorry, Brian, you can go ahead and switch back. So a couple talking points I wanted to wrap up on the reporting solutions here, starting with the report center. Report center is where you can essentially manage all of your reports in one area, one space, right? So instead of having to go to different modules and try to isolate where this report was created, what report it is, the report center is a easy, efficient way to be able to do that. Want to mention a quick snippet on the Quick Start libraries. These are pre-configured reports based on a Quick Start category or a Quick Start type that's selected at the time your instance is provisioned. Usually driven off of like a service industry or industry specific. But with those Quick Start categories, that allows you kind of design your chart of accounts, assigning a Quick Start category, and then utilizing those predefined, pre-built financial statements, for example, that you can simply copy over and use as a baseline, and then just make minor tweaks to fit your needs. And then I just a quick mention on the slide there on how to navigate to those Quick Start library, which you can actually navigate to that and then go through the list and click and see the layout and see how they're designed. The final talking point that I want to mention as part of the core solutions is the schedule and deliver. I know Tabitha mentioned it in her session. This is essentially a way, instead of if you have a report that you run daily, weekly, and then you have to manually deliver that, whether it's saving it to a cloud storage manually or emailing it to a group of people. Intacct offers a solution where you can actually schedule and have these reports run automatically and set up basically reoccurring delivery methods, whether that is to an email or a cloud storage, or even within Intacct. Okay, so before we jump into the demo, or essentially we're going to be jumping into a demo here, focused on the dashboards. This is dashboards help users monitor and access important aspects of the business by providing basically a quick at-a-glance insights into the company, right? So it's really quick information, and and Brian might talk specifically on some of the best practices around dashboards. Just keep in mind that dashboards, you can have unlimited number of dashboards per instance. But when we get into, the best practice, and I know Brian earlier talked about, limiting the number of components, right? So trying to keep that, minimized so that, or not including large reports, especially if you have multiple users, keep utilizing those dashboards at the same time. So to get in the demo, Brian will kind of pull up Intacct and start going through some of the basics, performance cards, and the different records, list views, and approvals to kind of demonstrate what that would look like in Intacct.
Thank you very much, Matt. Let's jump right into it. So I'm going to jump into my demo company here, and immediately greeted with our demo dashboard. A couple of miscellaneous things I want to point out first is if you want to log in and have dashboard be the first thing you see, each user can set this by going to click on their name at the top right and go to My Preferences. And then if you scroll down, what you're looking for is the display section here and My Start Page. So you can set My Start Page to be dashboard, and then you can pick the dashboard that you want to be your start page. And all this does is whenever you log in, the first thing you're going to see is whatever dashboard you specify. So when I log in, the first thing I'm going to see is this dashboard. And something to keep in mind when you're thinking about creating dashboards is one of the most common ways to do it is think about like users that don't really create transactions in the system, or if they do, you want all your reports that you're going to look at on one page, right? Um, so first thing you do when you log in, you see all the reports that you're looking for. The idea is, how do I make it so that I don't even have to navigate through the system to see all the information that I want to see? Um, you know, might be impossible. You might have to do some navigation, but how close can we get to that idea? To contribute to that is dashboard groups. So this little drop-down menu that exists, this is here because I have a group of dashboards that are grouped together. They're called the Quick Start group. And so each of these is a different dashboard assigned to the Quick Start group. So I mentioned before in my other session that you should be thinking about limiting the amount of actual reports you put on here to be about 15 or so. Honestly, this is kind of like an estimate, right? You may get away with less if they're bigger reports. You may be allowed to get away with more if they're smaller reports. Just kind of depends on the situation. But if you're running into performance issues, what we recommend is splitting those out into different dashboards, and dashboard groups makes it really easy to switch between the two. Okay, so how do you create one of these in the first place? If you just go to dashboards, you can click on the plus sign here, and it's going to ask you for a title. This is where you set up your group, right? So if I select Quick Start, it's going to show up here. You can select the number of columns that you want. You can set up a color if you'd like to color code your dashboards. If you go to filters, you can have up to 3 dimension filters selected here. So location is always a good one, right? Because location is always a dimension value. If it's a more customer-focused dashboard, you might want to throw a customer on there and maybe a department, right? And then you can always throw on as of date. This is always recommended because these filters filter the entire dashboard. So think about like when you're creating reports for dashboards, you should be considering making them as general as possible to apply across your entire system. So then you can make one report and then just filter it to the data that you're looking for specifically. Um, Lastly is the permissions set. You can either deny everyone and allow certain people, or you can allow everyone and deny certain people, however you want to do that. One thing I like to note here is even if a user has access to a dashboard, that does not mean that they can see all the reports on the dashboard. There's kind of two things going on here. One, they need access to the dashboard in the first place, but two, they need access to the data inside the reports. So if I were to go look at my controller dashboard, let's say I was a user that didn't have GL access. I would not be able to see any of the reports right here because these are all generated from the GL. They're financial reports. But I would be able to see all this stuff over here because these are not financial reports. They're just kind of quick links. Um, let's talk about what I'm seeing on the page right now. So we're looking at financial reports. That's what these two over here on the right side are, and these two in the middle are. Very simple. It's just a financial report, and you added it here with the plus sign. Um, over here on the left, we have links to other places in the system. So if I click on the gear icon, we can see how that was created. That's a component type of general, and the component was custom navigation. And then down here, we created the links. Um, it's pretty simple stuff. If I click on any of these, like approved bills, all it does is it opens up a new screen, takes me straight to the approved bill screen. Again, trying to cut down on, having to search through the menu for everything, creating a dashboard where all of my tasks and all of the things I want to look at are all on one page. Down here we've got reports with quick links to financial reports, general ledger reports, etc. And then down here is another just kind of miscellaneous item. This is a closed through summary. So this actually shows whether or not an application has been closed uh, for month end. So this is just another component type. Again, these are all just examples of various things you can do. Um, adding a component is very simple. Up here in the top right, you've got your add component button, a little plus sign. You're going to pick your component type. Got a few options here. I'm going to click record just to kind of show you that example here. But so reports, obviously, it's very simple. You've got a few options here. You've got financial reports, memorized reports. These are actually system reports and custom reports. To put those on a dashboard, you need to memorize them. And you do that by going and running the report. There's a little memorize option in the top right. Um, and then interactive visual explorers here. I imagine if ICRW, Interactive Custom Report Writer, was installed, it would also be here. So very simple. You just pick what type of report you want, and then you pick the actual report itself here in component. Here in record, you can do stuff like bill approval. You can also just reference actual bills. Like this is just a list of your AP bills. So instead of having to go through the menu, you can have it here. You can specify the number of rows so that you don't overflow your dashboard with stuff. And then down here, you're just clicking on what you want to appear in that list view that it's going to show. So I'm just going to pick a few things and hit the save button. There we go. It's gonna default over here to the top left, but you can click and drag if I do it correctly. Click and drag anything around to wherever you want. So if I want it in the middle down here. So it's only showing me the top 10, but if I wanted to see like the whole list, I can click this uh, magnifying glass icon and it opens up a new page where I can just kind of see everything. Got my whole list view here. And you can do that with any of these components here. Um, clicking on the magnifying glass to run the report in a different tab and do things like expand the report out, stuff like that. Up here in this top box, we've got what are called performance cards. These are really cool for KPIs and comparisons. It's a very nice visual thing. You see I've got my green and red arrows here indicating what's going on. If I click the gear icon, we can actually see what makes this up. So this is just an account group that is being compared to something, right? So account groups can be both just normal GL accounts, and they can also be statistical accounts. And so you pick this one. In this case, it's revenue. And then we're stating the reporting period. So this is current month. You can assign multiple reporting books if you'd like to do that. And we're comparing it to the prior period. And then you get the status indicator with this icon setting. So right here, we're saying we want the icon to be an arrow, and green indicates when we exceed budget. Um, so this kind of depends on what kind of information we're looking at, right? So revenue went up, so we exceeded budget. That's a good thing. That's green. Operating expenses went up, so it's plus 6% versus the prior month. That's a bad thing, so we put a red arrow. We're still indicating up because it's over, um, but it's a red arrow. So that's where you're indicating that is on that comparison window right there. So you can also do filtering. You can either allow or disallow dashboard filtering. I'd say 90% of the time, whenever you're creating something, you're going to allow dashboard filtering just because that's the most dynamic way to see it. But if there's a scenario where you don't want that to happen, you can always prevent that. And you can do that on reports as well. I take a look at one of these reports. You can do the same thing here. You can prevent dashboard filtering. Yeah, that's about it on dashboards. Oh, I didn't show you. I kind of just talked about it, but we'll go here. These filter tags apply across the entire dashboard. I talked about it before, but when you're creating dashboards, the best way, in my opinion, to do it is to build a bunch of reports that apply to your entire company, regardless of entity, and then use these filters to just switch cleanly between different views that you want to see instead of either creating a bunch of different reports or a bunch of different dashboards. You can just easily switch between consolidated versus very specific views. Pretty much all I had on dashboards. So we'll go back.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. I know there was one request. I don't know if we covered it. Somebody in chat threw out there looking for a dashboard around the top 10 vendors. If we have time at the end, we'll get to that. We're just kind of limited for time and have a lot to cover. So please, if we have time at the end, bring that back up and we'll see if we can get to that. I don't know if Brian even has that report built out to show on a dashboard. So yeah, next slide, we'll jump into our first poll focused on dashboards. So the question is, how many dashboards can an instance have in Sage Intacct? Give a little time here to answer. Perfect. In the chat, thank you, Lou. We'll yeah, we'll revisit that at the end. Okay, I don't know if there was somewhere to see that everybody answered, but we'll yeah, move forward. The correct answer is D, unlimited. You could have unlimited reports, dashboards within an instance, but it is recommended, which we mentioned, and maybe threw some people off. It is recommended to minimize the components and to help the performance of it. So, correct answer, unlimited. Okay. So for our next reporting solution, we're going to jump into the financial report writer, which is essentially the tabbed interface that allows you to process from adding rows and columns and to putting the final touches on your report for display and formatting purposes. Quick mention here on the data. Financial reports pull directly from the general ledger and utilizes account groups to create the totals and the subtotals. So if you're unfamiliar with the account groups, it's essentially kind of the base of the report and what the reports are based off of. So I know this is kind of a lengthier demo, a lot to show through the financial report writer. So Brian will jump into his demo with the Intacct and kind of go through the real-time creation of a financial report with custom views.
Thanks, Matt. All right. Um, Back on our dashboard, I'm actually just going to walk through a couple of these reports here. The first one I want to show is this top 10 AR balances report. And actually, let's show the top 10 AP since that person was talking about vendors. Uh, so when you create a report, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to name it, right? The first real decision you need to make is whether your reports are going to be structured on accounts or on dimensions. So what this question is asking is, what do you want your rows to be? Do you want your rows to be account groups and accounts down the side, or do you want them to be dimension values? So I chose this one because this one shows dimensions. So this one is set up to be vendors down the side. So it's got a what's called a dimension structure called active vendors. And if we took a look at this, it's probably like a filter based on whether or not a vendor is active or inactive, right? That's what makes up this group of vendors. Um, and so that's all we have selected in the rows is we're indicating active vendors here. And then here in the detail level, we could show summary and it would just give us all the balances across all the vendors. Or we could show detail. And when we show detail, that's when you get this kind of display where you can either display all or top or bottom. And this is where we're saying top 10, right? So this is the rows. All we're saying so far is that we want to show top 10 vendors of something. We don't know what yet. If we go into columns, this is where the um, the actual accounts come into play, right? So column one is just going to be the name of the dimension, so our vendor name. Column two is going to be uh, accounts payable account group actual. So this is just actual data from the GL on the accounts payable account group. Um, and so that's how we're getting our top 10, right? We're looking in the AP account for balances by vendor, indicated by the rows. And whatever just has the highest balance, those get into the top 10, right? So we can do the same thing with any dimension. So if you're looking at AR, this can be customer. If you're looking at inventory, this can be item. If you're looking at revenue, it can be customer as well. So just that first decision you're making is whether you want accounts to be rows or columns, and then whether or not you want dimensions to be rows and accounts to be columns. Um, that's the first decision. We're going to jump out of that and jump into this profit and loss here for the rest of it. So this is an account-based report structure. This is by far the most common. And so when I go to rows and I select my account groups, you'll notice I'm only selecting one thing here. Kind of like last time, I was selecting one thing there, but I was referencing 10 different vendors. Here I'm selecting one account group. It's called the net income account group. But if it's referencing all these other account groups. So this is a group of groups, right? It's got a hierarchy to it. So the important thing to know about the hierarchy is this is what determines where your totals and subtotals exist. So for each one of these lines, I'm going to have a subtotal. And then for this top line up here at the top of the hierarchy, I'm going to have a grand total across all that nets all of these together. And we'll see that if I run this report. We got our grand total down here. And then for each of these, we've got a subtotal. So gross profit is a subtotal and the grand total down here. There's actually an exception to this. We'll talk about that later when we're formatting the report. But by default, these are subtotals and subtotals, or totals and subtotals. Um, One thing I always like to show here is if you have your detail level set to summary, you can do expand by dimension. And so we pick the revenue group. Let's expand by customer here. So even though we're basing the report off accounts as rows, we can still have dimensionality in our rows. We're just expanding this account group by the customer dimension. So if I preview that now, I'm getting my revenue account group and all these customers are showing up. You'll notice there's a no customer value down here for $23,000. This is why it's really important to dimensionalize your general ledger. Because if you have this balance in here, this means that I obtained revenue somehow, but don't have a customer to associate it with. So you don't really know where that came from. So dimensionalization is really important for reports like this. Um, so that's rows. I'm gonna set this back. There's a couple of other things here, basis for amounts, whether that's the period. You can also do like percentages. You can also always display something. So if you want zeros to show up on your report, make sure you check these boxes. Um, in columns, so column one is almost always account name or account number or both, right? Just to tell you what you're looking at. Here in column two, um, when we're looking at column types, we've got actual. You can do computations, period variances and differences, budget variances and differences. You got a lot of options here. I don't have time to go over all of them, but just to kind of name a few to give you an idea of the most popular. You're going to select your reporting period here, and you can give headings, customize those. You can also expand by stuff here. So just like in our rows, we can expand by dimension here, but unlike rows, we can expand by time periods. So if you wanted to, for let's say make a 12-month report, a rolling 12-month report, instead of making 12 different columns specifying each month, you can just set your reporting period to be current year and then expand time period by months. And now you're going to have a report that shows you every single month for the year specified in the as of date. So really useful for cutting down on the amount of work you have to do to set up a report. Um, you can also pick what that number shows as, whether it's an average or a number. There's also like percentage options whenever you're doing variances and stuff like that. Um, and then you can also do kind of like a display uh, color scale sort of thing here. You'll see those later on. There's a trend indicator here. I'll show you in a bit. Oh, and I almost forgot. You can specify other accounting books other than accrual here. Um, so if you want to combine books together in your financials, this is where you would do that. Moving on to column three, this is where we've got our budget set up. So in column two, this is just your actual. This is what actual numbers are. Column three, this is just referencing the budget and what it is. And then in column 4 and 5, this is where we're doing comparisons. So we're doing a budget difference here. So it's actual minus budget. And then on column 5, we're doing a budget variance. And this is where you see down here on the show as we're indicating this is percentage. Um, and in these columns, we're also doing a trend indicator. So we're saying we want an arrow here. And we want it to be green when the value increases. So if I go back to look at my report, you can see I've got these green arrows indicating that I went over budget. Well, because my budget's zero, right? Um, in fact, this is mostly because I spread it out by customer and I didn't budget by customer. So that's why the budget's zero here. But down here, you'll see like the actual numbers here in my total section. So we got 460,000 over. You'll also notice there's like a normalize section here. This is basically if you don't normalize, then it's just going to show you the number minus the number. If you do normalize, it's going to take into account whether this is a debit account or a credit account. So it's like sometimes, even though this nets to be a negative number, you want to show it as a positive number because it's a debit or a credit account. And so this is what normalized is for. Um, Sometimes what I tell people if they're struggling with what to choose is set it one way, and if it looks wrong, put it back to the other way. Sometimes that's just the easiest way to do it. Computations. So these are a type of column. If I go back to my columns, you can set computation on actual or computation on budget. And it's very simple. You just click in here and you're saying, here's what I want to do in this column. Uh, let's say you wanted to divide everything by your revenue. You would say, divide here, and you just type in revenue. And now I'm just taking every single row and I'm dividing it by whatever my revenue and number is for that period. So this is useful for if you want to get percentages on certain account groups, stuff like that. Moving on to filters. So one thing I like to note is I recommend checking the prompt box for as of date and any locations that you ever want to filter this by. So like location is usually a good one. If you have multiple reporting books, prompting for reporting book is good. Any defaults you set here, I would be careful about because any defaults you set are going to show up every single time you run the report. So as of date, I definitely recommend not putting a default in there. Um, and also these dimension filters, I would just caution you to setting them because every single time you run the report, that's going to be the way it wants to run. It's usually just best to set up a prompt and then have the user decide. Like I said, we want to build reports that are dynamic and can be used across the entire system and then just filter for the thing you want to see. Let's go to format real quick. Most of this is self-explanatory. I'll just note that some of these color options are for PDF only. And if I go to the rows and totals section, there's stuff you can do here to make your report look good. You can hide headings when you don't want to see them. You can also hide totals. So like I was saying before, um, account groups designate totals and subtotals. This is the one exception. You can hide subtotals or totals when you don't want them to show up on a report for a specific account group. Maybe it's just repeat information, right? You don't really need it to show up multiple times. Notations, these are kind of like computations where they're a type of column that you set up here and then specify in the column section. These are really simple. They're just notes. You just type in here what you want to show up on each row. And then in the column, you set up a notation column and it'll appear there. Permissions, these are very similar to the dashboard permission spiel. You can either give everyone access and exclude certain people or vice versa. And to note, even if someone has access to see a financial report, they still need to have access to the actual data in the financial report for them to view it. So just keep that in mind. That was a really quick run through on financial reports. I'll pass it back to you, Matt.
Yeah, thank you for that, Brian. I love being able to watch that and see. I can't tell you how many times I've dealt with, normalized or normal balance for GL accounts and trying to export data and having it show up as a negative when I expect it to be positive. Come across that too many times. So seeing that within the build, being able to create that, yeah, just kind of hit me on a real personal level because I've dealt with that quite a bit. So a ton of great features in there and a ton more. You didn't cover everything within the financial report writer or even dashboards in general. Again, we're just trying to hit on some of these key points and features and speak to, the importance of elevating your reporting and essentially Brian tied it back to the importance of dimensionalizing your data within Intacct. That's really going to help drive the ability to slice and dice data. So that'll lead us to essentially our next poll question. So for this poll question, asking what determines the totals and subtotals on a financial report. We'll just give a minute here to let everybody get a answer submitted. All right, it looks like looks like D stopped fluctuating, so we'll move forward there. The correct answer is A, account groups. Um, remembering that account groups are actually what determine the subtotals in totals for financial reports. I was thinking that the format tab would have been the kind of the trick there. As Brian mentioned, on the format tab, essentially is where you can actually hide totals. It doesn't actually determine what the total would be. That's the account groups. So, okay, leading into our final demonstration within Intacct here is going to be focused on the custom report writer. So similar to the financial report writer, right, where you can customize and build reports, um, these reports would be driven off of specialized sets of information based on your company or application data, which can include, financial, non-financial data, or a combination of both. Unlike financial reports, right, those are, specifically pulling data from general ledger information, whether that's, budgets, GL activity, or potentially, statistical accounts. Custom report writer, you can pull, application data as well as financial data, and potentially combine them depending on what you're trying to do. So leading into Brian, he'll demonstrate and jump into Intacct and go through creating a custom AP aging report using the custom report writer.
Thanks, Matt. All right. So to get to custom reports, I'm going to go to reports here and down to custom reports. And so this will show you a list of just all the reports in the system. Um, and the one we're going to be talking about right here is the custom AP aging. So this might be the most popular report request we have to date. And usually the conversation goes like this. It's like, hey, Brian, um, you know, the AP aging out of the system, it's good, but it doesn't show me this, whatever this is, right? So in this example, I'm kind of picking on the location ID. So because location is a line level dimension, the system report doesn't actually report on it. Um, and so what's really common is, hey, well, I want to see this dimension value. Um, and that doesn't ever show up on the system report because it's line level data that the system doesn't ever look at. So here you can see uh, this is a AP aging with line level data, and I can get at the location ID. So how did I build this report? Um, Custom report writer is really easy to explain. It's really easy to learn. Um, the hardest part is actually in step 1 and step 2. So step 1 is you need to pick your data source. Um, the reason this is difficult is because there's a lot of objects here, and this determines the capability of the rest of the report. The only thing I can really say here is one, don't be afraid to experiment. You're not going to break the system just by creating a report. So feel free to get your hands dirty and just try stuff out, see what works. Two, don't be afraid to ask us. Just like say, hey, I want to build a custom report. Here's what I want to do. I'm not really sure what data source I should be picking for such a thing. Those are usually pretty easy questions to answer. Sometimes they have multiple answers, just depending on what you want to do. Um, but down here, I'm picking the vendor aging report. You might notice there's also vendor aging header and vendor aging line detail. Um, these are mainly just transaction level data, whether it's the header of the transaction or the line detail of the transaction. Whereas the vendor aging report object itself is what's going to give us our buckets of like 30 to 60, 60 to 90, etc. So this is kind of what I'm saying. It's really hard to know the differences between these things without experience, and I can't just sit here and tell you about all of them. And I don't really know about all of them because I haven't used them all yet. So we're going to use vendor aging report here, and the easy thing about the financial report writer, you just keep clicking the next button and just do what's on the page. So next step, step 2, we're picking our columns. This is what we want to appear on the report. So obviously we want all these buckets, but what else do we want? You'll notice that I've got these little drop-down arrows that kind of expand a hierarchy. So these are what are called related objects. So my data source that I picked is this top object here. And then what's related to it is the vendor aging line detail. And what's related to the vendor aging line detail is all of these dimension values, because they're on the line, and then the vendor aging header, and so on and so forth. Like this just keeps going. So what I picked for this report, I didn't pick anything on the line. You might think that location ID would be here, but it's just location record number for some reason. So to find location ID, I actually had to go down one step further and look at the location dimension that's related to the line. So here is where I'm clicking the location ID. So this is where I'm getting like the 110, 120, etc. And then also I'm just getting some transaction header information, right? GL posting date, record number, vendor ID, and vendor name. You might notice some of these fields have a little box around them and an up arrow. This just indicates that it's a clickable field. So if I go to my custom report, here underneath bill, I have these blue fields. This, if I click on one, it takes me straight to the bill. So if you want to have interactive custom reports, well, not from the report writer, but custom reports that are interactive, you can use those fields with a little green up arrow so that you can click in and just go straight to a transaction that's being referenced in the report. Next step. You can add calculate columns. The only thing I really have to say here is it has to be a number field. So it can't do dates, unfortunately. It has to be an actual number field that's being referenced. So it's a little bit limited, but this is for if you want to do calculations across columns. So if I wanted a grand total of all my agings at the very end, I could add these all together, right? And I would just need to, you know, put a plus sign in between these two things. Next step, selecting column sequence. This one's pretty self-explanatory. Just click and drag your columns to be in the sequence that you want. You can also rename them. So this used to be named record number. I just called it bill so that we knew what we were talking about. So if you want to rename things, you can to make it easier to read. Next step is adding more column totals. So these are totals and subtotals for the rows. So instead of across the columns, we're talking about cross rows. So you can see I have a little subtotal here. And if I scroll down to the bottom, here's my grand total for the whole aging. I'm getting that because I'm checking the boxes for sum across these. You can do other stuff other than sum, but that's probably the most common. Step 6 is where you sort, very similar to step 4. You just indicate the order in which you want to sort, and then you note ascending or descending. I'm just going by GL posting date here. Step 7, filter. So this is what I would call a hard filter. And we kind of talked about this in financial reports before, but the warning I would give to this is something that you always filter the report by. So if you want if you want to dynamically filter each time you run the report, that's later and in the prompt section. This is This is if you want this report to always run with this filter. A good example would be if you want like a list of all of your AP bills that have been paid. Um, you could set like column to be state, and then set the state to be paid. State equals paid. Now you're just going to get only AP bills where the state is paid. And just like step 2, where we're selecting our columns, I have access to every single related object here as well. So you can filter by pretty much anything. Step 8 is where you select whether or not you want to group data. A really good graphic here explaining just how this works. So in this report, we're grouping by customer. And so you can see Puget Networks, here's their transactions, and then here's their sums. So you might notice I've got subtotals here. This is because I'm grouping by vendor. So you can see my subtotal name is the vendor ID here. If I wasn't grouping by vendor, then I would not have these subtotals. I would just have a total from the bottom at the bottom due to me checking the sum box. But because I checked the sum total box as well as group by vendor, I'm now getting these subtotals. So that's how that works. The next button here, um, this is how you want to group the data. You can have a maximum of 3. I'm only doing 1 just by vendor ID, but I could do it by date if I wanted to do that or something crazy. Um, Here we're just ordering the groups. If I had more than one, I could indicate how the hierarchy works for grouping and then how I want to sort them. Step 11, these are just defaults. Kind of like before, I recommend as of date, leaving that blank so it defaults to today and you can just set it to be whatever you want. Show details. This is kind of yes or no. This kind of depends on you and the report you're building. But here I'm indicating yes because I want to see those that location data. Step 12 is for charts. So you can actually create various different charts using the custom report writer. I don't do this very often, um, but it is there. If you're interested in this and want to explore it, definitely let us know. I'm not really going to go into it today just due to time, but you can create simple charts with the custom report writer. Step 13, this is where we finally get to prompts. So you can see here, I'm prompting for the vendor ID um, and also the location ID so that I can filter by either of those if I wish whenever I run the report. And then this is just, you know, organizing those prompts. And I pretty much always recommend enabling when memorized. This just allows you, whenever you're memorizing the report, to still use these filters. So almost always a good idea to check those, but if you're not going to use it, you don't have to. Uh, and last but not least, you're going to name the report, and then if you would like, you can add it to a menu. So the way I navigated to this report is I went to reports, custom reports, and then I picked it out of a long list, right? But because I checked this box and selected the accounts payable application, I can also run this report by going to accounts payable. Now I have a custom reports section here, and I can pick the custom AP aging right here. So this is really useful whenever you're setting up reports for your users, so they don't have to ever leave AP and go to reports. It's just right here along with your other system reports. And that's pretty much it. I ran through it real fast because we're limited on time, but definitely let us know if you have a report idea that you want to run by us, and we can sit down and have a conversation about it.
Perfect. Thanks, Brian. Yeah, sure everybody enjoyed seeing it in action. We're short on time. I want to get this last poll question out, which is, which of the following is an example that you would not use the custom report writer for? So just give 30 seconds here, let everybody get an answer in. So as everybody's answering that, just a quick mention, we're running kind of short on time here, so it looks like Lou, the request you had there was answered. Nikki, thank you for following up on that. There's a ton more content that we could go through. Again, this was kind of limited. We really just wanted to give some live demonstrations, get people kind of thinking and understanding, dimensionalized data, how to create these reports, the different solutions within Intacct. Um, so 30 seconds are up. And the correct answer for this one is income statement. Uh, so it looks like 82% of us got that one right. Yeah, we would utilize the financial report writer over the custom report writer for an income statement in that example. So uh, we want to jump to the next slide here. Just want to kind of get this out there. I know we're wrapping up on time. So some additional resources, as we were mentioning, right? We crammed a ton of content, and there's much more that we could have covered for each dashboard, custom report, financial report writer, all of them. There's so much more in those tools. So additional resources, if you have questions, don't hesitate to jump into the help center Sage Intacct has, the university, Sage community, and of course, your friends at Dean Dorton here. We would love to, work with you if you have ideas like Brian mentioned or questions on, trying to create and build a certain report. Would love to be able to help. So please don't hesitate to, send a request to the email address there, ERP support at ddftech.com. So I know we have just a minute or two here. So any questions out there that we might be able to answer really quickly?
There was a question from Brianna. She asked, can we do a computation in a row instead of column? And I think that's while Brian was going through the financial report writer that came in.
Yeah, so just real quick, if I go to, it's actually a type of account group. So when you're picking account groups, you have a few options, and one of them is computation. So if you want like a very specific row to just be a computation instead of, a whole column across all of your rows being a computation, this is how you would do that. And it's very simple, just, two sides of a formula here where you're selecting account group, an account, or a constant, and then you're indicating what's going on. You can, as far as I know, you can only do one calculation per computation group, but kind of like other accounts groups, you can kind of hierarchy these two together. So if you want to take a computation and then do another computation on it, you can reference a computation account group in another computation. So this is how you would make like a single row that's just a computation of your choosing with account groups.
Thanks for that.
Awesome.
And another one came in, can we add a column to show invoices on hold?
I'm assuming this would be for the custom report writer. And let me see. I don't know off the top of my head, but let me see if I can find out real quick.
Yeah, and I was going to say this is a good example of Brian mentioned the different data sets that you can select here. And a lot of times there's so much related objects. I'm going to go with what Brian said. I'm assuming so. Yep. Okay. But it's kind of like guess and check.
Yeah. So going to the vendor aging header because I'm looking for like header level invoice data, right? And then I was just looking at all the columns and on hold is right here. So this should indicate like true or false very simply as to whether or not the particular invoice on that line is on hold.
Perfect.
Okay. Well, that takes us to the very end of our session today, right on time.